But in keeping the momentum going for this session, I want to introduce our next guest, which kind of complements what Barack was just talking about related to the whole piece of talent and governance. And so we're thrilled to have Gali Cooks, who's the president and CEO of Leading Edge, with us today, who we're going to engage in a conversation around our key strategic priority of that comprehensive center for talent development. Obviously, Leading Edge, we all know, mobilizes Jewish nonprofits to become places where great people, both lay leaders and professionals, deliver great impact. So thank you for being here, Gali. And joining us also with Gali in conversation is Jon Frankel. And Jon is an experienced award-winning TV correspondent who has throughout his career broadcasted human stories for NBC, ABC, and NBC News. And he was a correspondent for Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel, amongst many other exciting roles. So, Jon, thanks for being here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you two. Carry us forward. Thank you.
Terrific. David, thank you so much for that introduction. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having us. I'm going to try and let Gali do most of the talking here. So let me get out of the way. But to pick up exactly what David had segued from with what Barack was saying, and to use the sports metaphors, listen, talent always matters. Ask any general manager, who are they putting at first base, who's playing quarterback. But why does talent matter so much in this field?
Yeah, thank you, Jon, and thank you, Barack and David, for the invitation to come and be with you all today. It's very rare that I get to speak to a group of folks who truly get it, but I'm going to hammer the point even further. The importance of talent for the Jewish community cannot be overstated. As a good friend of mine and mentor once said, as in relates to post 10/7 world, we really are living in unprecedented times. And there has been a tectonic shift in the Jewish community since that time. And so we need good people to get in there and help us really lead the community, and in many ways lead us through a wilderness of the kind that we're going through right now. I do want to say, Jon, that you come from the world of sports. My first job out of school was in the world of diplomacy. And I saw firsthand the fact that good people, not only do they win games and, close gifts or whatever, they can stop wars, they can fashion our society, they can create peace. And you have good people making good decisions, pivoting, like Barack was saying in his previous moment, which is honestly the only certainty. That is going to enable you to win in whatever way. And that's really the core of what we're here to do, to try and preach that gospel, and also to support the people who are supporting our community through this harrowing time.
I think we all sense a sense of urgency now, given what happened in Israel on 10/7. But what's different? What's changed in the landscape in terms of how you pick your people and who's important to have on your team?
Yeah, I think a few things have changed. This group is probably familiar with some of the research that came out of the Jewish Federations of North America soon after October 7th that said that there is a surge of, in some ways, our Jewish antennas and Jewish souls have been lit up by October 7th. Out of that tragedy came a lot of cleaving to the tribe in many ways. And so we have a lot of folks who, by some estimates, in the Jewish community, about 70% of American Jews are just not engaged in Jewish life. And post October 7th, there was really this tidal wave of understanding that these are my people in some way. And so there's this surge of incoming folks who are coming to synagogue, folks who are wanting to connect to community. That translates into board volunteerism, as well as professional. For the first time, folks are saying, how can I contribute my strengths, my talents, my time, my treasure to the Jewish community? That is a tremendous opportunity. We need all hands on deck as it relates to Jewish civilization, not only in the United States and diaspora in general, certainly in Israel, And that has really shifted. And the playbook, I mean, in many ways, October 7th ended about an 80-year vacation from history for American Jews, which knew greater prosperity, greater liberty, lower anti-Semitism than certainly, modern ancestors. And that means that that's a rude awakening. And in some ways, we have to, we were, hit over the head, and now we have to gain our bearings and move forward.
As they say, 4 Jews, 10 opinions,
Yeah.
and everybody has different skills. So how do you, as you try to engage so much of American Jewry that has not been activated in this way, and I'm not asking you to profile in a sense because that's too hard, but how do you identify quickly and help this board and help Barak identify people who maybe are not involved yet, but would like to get involved?
Hmm. I think it's really interesting. I mean, there is something about just posture and mindset. I think the folks who are not necessarily like wagging the finger and being like, we should do this and all that, but saying like, how can we solve this together? And knowing that the first step that might lead to a trip, the second step might lead to like a scraped knee, but the more you work the problem, the more you understand where the parameters are, the more you're going to figure out how to potentially improve to in some way move forward. That's the posture, as opposed to, when I was studying adaptive leadership, and one of the elements of adaptive leadership, which basically says leaders have to adapt to a constantly changing environment. Change is the only constant that is in life, until it ends. And so you have to continue to adapt. I mean, again, very similar to sports. And so there is this element of within this adaptive leadership frame, turning up the heat. And so a leader can turn up the heat, and that makes the molecules move very, very fast. And that means that for some people, different colors of people show up. Some of them can get very accusatory. John, you didn't do blah, blah, blah. And some might say, okay, we got to move quickly and let's get going. And that, look, we need, again, all hands on deck. Like, diverse teams get better results all the time. And at the same time, that posture of like, how can I help? Like, oh, I can see a role here, that taking initiative, and also thinking of the communal as opposed to the the personal, although holding that as well, that's the most important thing.
I just to follow up on that, and again, maybe a little bit redundant here. Maybe I'm asking you to paint something that's impossible for you even to imagine.
Yeah.
Because help comes from all corners. The people who serve on this board all come from different backgrounds. But if you had a blank canvas and you said, okay,
Mhm.
here's the type of person I would like to paint because they bring these sorts of skills that all organizations, not specific to the JCC, but all Jewish organizations or any good functioning organization in the nonprofit world can use this type of person.
Yeah. I would say there are two sides. One is fundamental, like foundational, executive skills. I think if we're looking at the Jewish community, and specifically the area where we work, which is the organized Jewish community, so a tapestry of about 10,000 nonprofits that hold up our community, we need professionalism. There's a certain fundamental foundational level of just professional practice and muscle that is eminently fixable, by the way, and eminently trainable. But that is one of the opportunities that we have as a community. We've under indexed on that. So that's the fundamental. And then there's the aspirational, the what, where's the puck going kind of generative thought, and frankly the ability, that some of the latitude within boundaries, but the latitude to have some R&D. That is something that is anathema to the Jewish nonprofit sector and the nonprofit sector, because resources are so scarce, but we don't know what's going to work. So there needs to be a spirit of innovation, or at least a little bit of not just copying and pasting year over year and saying we'll just get the same results. So it's that fundamental, you can't play pro sports until you have the, sort of foundational drills, or, jazz. Like, you have to have like a pretty good level of like understanding, and then being able to improvise within boundaries. Those are
What
the most important things.
from the research that you've done and the data that you've gathered, what has changed the most in the world of nonprofit when you look at the landscape? And so what are the different hurdles or obstacles that exist today that didn't exist maybe prior to October 7th or even going back 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that has changed, and I don't want to embarrass you, Barack, but I'm probably going to embarrass you, are leaders like Barack who are actually getting into these roles. A new generation of leaders. There has been a generational transition in leadership. That is the reason why Leading Edge was created. There was going to be this leadership cliff. All the boomers are retiring. Oh my God, there's crisis. And what an opportunity for the leaders who actually came up. If we're talking about the Jewish community through camp, through an element of communal cohesion and wanting to build that community and leading into that and wanting to build environments where the talent can actually maximize its potential and not just saying, John, did you clock in? Did you clock out? As if you were, a widget. That has been the biggest change. There really has been a generational shift. The overwhelming majority of leaders have turned over in the last decade since Leading Edge was created. And that has unfrozen the system because every one of them are not like, okay, I'm on automatic pilot. Let me take, the last guy's handbook and let's, continue on. They're partnering with their board and they're saying like, what's the strategy here? Where is the puck going? Where do we need to lead actually, not just you coast? That's been the biggest thing. I also think just overall, the nonprofit sector has been much more professionalized. You do have a lot of folks like me who went to business school, have MBAs, are coming back in. You have folks who've gone, in a variety of ways, have gone to different sectors, are bringing in some of those skills, asking questions about improvement, those types of things. And that's leading to creativity, that's leading to efficiency in ways that are, pretty miraculous and positive.
Is there, to talk finances, because that's always sort of
Yeah.
that's the entry point here, right? I mean, that's nothing exists without it. There's always the ask. But is it in this day and age, here we are, 2025, is it about continuing to increase revenues and asking your board members to reach into every friend's pocketbook? Or is it learning to become more efficient? Do all these nonprofits need to be more efficient in order to get done everything they want to do? I mean, Barack just laid out an incredible agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's that's truly the answer. We just finished a survey of about 300 CEOs who cut across all different types of Jewish nonprofits, not just JCCs. And we asked them a bunch of questions about their own leadership, their teams, and their boards. The lowest scoring question across the board in these surveys was around my board's ability to partner with me on fundraising. Overall. Now, that's not different than some of the other benchmarks in the nonprofit sector.
Meaning the board wasn't as helpful as the CEO
Yes,
needed them to be.
exactly. In opening doors and working the phones, in potentially giving. And that's part of the reality because we do need real finances and resources to fuel some of that stuff. At the same time, there is a way to cut expenses or to be able to do away with certain programs that we're not good at shuttering in the nonprofit sector, because they work for 5 people, but not 50 people, but it's also not about quantity, it's about quality. It's a very different sort of way, and it's very hard to measure social impact. And not many organizations do it with any sort of rigor. So yes, John, you got it. Cut expenses, raise revenues, but strategy. That's it.
But as Barack just pointed out, if Lynn Whittles is doing her part by helping to identify a CFO and they're not having to go to a major search firm and spend 6 figures, there's a way to make it work because you've got the resources at your fingertips
You got
if
it.
your board is all in.
Yep, exactly. And that's the creativity that is needed.
Well, and I think, you've talked about this before, and this is one of the things that you've worked on at Leading Edge, which is simply partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just outside partnerships, it's partnerships within your own organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And within and across, I mean, again, we survey many Jewish nonprofits and employees across the board. And what we find that employees love their teams. They don't necessarily love other departments within their existing organizations. So like they love their block, but not their neighborhood. kind of thing. And then when you actually talk about partnering with other Jewish organizations, it's not the norm. Let's say that. Even though there are 10,000 Jewish organizations, there's an entire ecosystem. And if we looked at it as a sector, as Jewish Inc., if you will, that could be incredibly powerful for unlocking a lot of value for the community, as well as those who lead and work and serve within it.
And I want to be careful here. I want to make sure that I haven't burned down the house and said,
I
okay,
don't
wait a
think
minute.
you can, John. I
Isn't.
think I'm more probably at fault of that.
No, but
Yes.
I've asked you some of the things that can change and improve, but tell me what's working, because obviously the JCC as a national organization has succeeded to a great extent.
Yes.
The very strong name in the Jewish community and beyond. So tell us what's working and how we can continue to take advantage of those things and underscore them.
Yeah. I mean, I love that because we kvetch too much in the Jewish community and don't kvel enough. So I appreciate that. I think in many ways, the Jewish community's business, if you will, our core offering to the community and to the world is what's working. It's about connection. It's about relationship. There's a pandemic of loneliness in this country. People are not getting out of their house and off their phones to do anything, let alone, connect with one another. And that is the core of the Jewish community. The front door of that are JCCs. If we think of the business, and I know Barak has said that there are like 18 different business units within the JCC. I mean, let's take camp as a perfect example. Camp is like the antidote to everything that's going wrong in our society. You force the kid off their phone, they're actually getting out there, they're getting active, they're getting Jewish community, they're understanding where they came from, where they maybe want to go, they're experimenting in certain things. You're developing all these, different counselors and whatnot. That's the pipeline. I mean, that is ground zero. The JCCs are ground zero for so much of what can be right and what is going right and frankly should be, extrapolated, blown up in a positive way within our community. The JCCs also are the biggest employer in Jewish life. I think there are about 36,000 full-time employees across 170 or so JCCs. There are about 150,000 total full-time employees across the community. That is huge. They're also a lot of first-time professionals who are employed at JCCs, which, by the way, if we think of like the graduating college class of 2026, they are going into one of the worst job markets in history. And so thinking of just like the opportunity and some of the creativity that is coming out of certain nonprofits or certain JCCs, I should say, is that's major highlights, major things that are going right in our community.
Well, so that leads me to my next question perfectly, which is that, I mean, I guess you're saying, hey, go to the Hillels, go to the other Jewish organizations on college campuses, and if JP Morgan isn't offering somebody, or Morgan Stanley, or whoever it is, isn't offering somebody a job, then hey, come work for the JCC. How do you
100%.
dispel?
Yeah.
So how do you
Yeah.
dispel for anybody of any age, whether it's a 30-year-old who is unhappy in their career choice, or it's somebody fresh off a college campus? How do you dispel any stigmas that might exist about, one, working in the nonprofit world, and two, specifically in the Jewish nonprofit world?
Yeah. Oh, John, this is like as if you were in my previous meeting, because we were just talking about the sector branding. Like, what is the employee and the employer value proposition for the Jewish nonprofit sector? Because we are losing talent to the JP Morgans and to frankly the Teach for Americas. Like, if you're interested in education, why would you go to work for a Jewish day school as opposed to Teach for America? There is something about the inferiority complex in general in the nonprofit sector. Just our name, nonprofit, right? It's like the negative space of what we are. Like, what is that? And I will say we are, I believe, on the precipice of that being transformed. Other sectors and other roles are already and going to be continuing to be disrupted by AI and technology, and the fact that a lot of those jobs, AI is coming for them. The places where there's still going to be work for at least another generation, and who knows, it's hard, it's dangerous to make predictions, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do it, is relationship, is those jobs that have to deal with connection. And that is something that we need to lean into. There's something about just the way in which we talk about our work, which should be with pride. It is purpose filled. We talk about it too often in the Jewish community and in the nonprofit sector as, I got into community college, which is awesome, by the way. Community college is amazing, and we should lean into that. But, there's something about that. And honestly, Jon, the whole purpose of Leading Edge is to one day, like when my daughter grows up and goes to like a Shabbat dinner and says, I work for the JCC of Milwaukee. And people are like, oh my God, that is incredible. And they should be doing that right now. And I think they probably are. But that should be across the board. And that, as opposed to, some of the negative places that I get, when you're like, I work for a Jewish nonprofit. So I don't have the answers, Jon, but join me, board, because this is part of the opportunity.
So I'm going to ring the bell to any of the board members now. They can start jotting down, if they haven't already, a question that they want to ask you, and I'm about to open up the floor to them. But before I do that, now you've got this captive board listening to you, and you've got 2 minutes to make your spiel to them about what they can do now, different than perhaps they've done. Again, we don't want to keep, they've been great. They're participating. They're helping Barak. They want to move in a different direction. But now you got a minute and a half, 2 minutes to sell them on why they can re-up and re-engage and be thrilled about where things are going.
I think it's as simple as the JCCs are the front door of so much of what we can do as a community. And it will take incredible people who work and lead and serve within these organizations. We have undervalued and underinvested in these folks for a generation, which is why Leading Edge was created, honestly. And there's no need for that. We have incredible people, they're passionate, and they are primed. And we have an opportunity to actually capture them. And within JCCs in particular, because of the wide surface area, because of the way in which there's so many ways to connect, I think the boards have to lead in many ways. Too often, the boards are behind many professionals, at least that we work with, and in some ways don't have that posture of like, how might we together? It's like, prove to me that you've run your numbers kind of thing. We need expansive thinking. We need leadership now more than ever. And what would it mean for the largest movement on the planet for the Jewish community to lead? That's the opportunity for JCCA.
That's wonderful. I'm already seeing a couple questions pop up. So why don't we open up the floor or the mics or the Zoom mics, if you will. And if you've got a question, feel free. I'm sure it'll be a much more informed and pointed question than those I've asked, Gali. So please, anybody jump in.
Okay. Whenever the use of technology as an opportunity to support talent development and doing better. Oh, yes, Paul. Amen. Technology is a tool. There's so much that we could be doing. Too often, the Jewish community is like a generation behind when it comes to technological adoption. We've been talking with folks about the fact that with this revolution of AI, we have an opportunity to leapfrog and use technology in the way that it should be used. And whether it's, a learning management system that standardizes the way that we onboard folks into the JCCs or the Jewish community, frankly, or being able to train managers or to onboard board members, et cetera. This is something that is such an opportunity. I will say this, many funders and many board members see the kind of investments that are needed to build out these kinds of technological systems or even to bring in new things as overhead, as pejorative. And so it's very hard to get funding for those things, even though it could be, the wind in our sails. So I'm just going to say yes. And that's part of the opportunity that we all have.
You may have addressed this. I'm gonna pick up a question from Sue Straight, which her question is about how some young professionals feel that they're going to be underpaid, particularly in the nonprofit world. And you perhaps you touched on it by saying there's purpose here. But again, how do you appeal to that youngster who looks at a classmate and that classmate's going to make 6 figures or whatever it is, And they're going to say, well, listen, I don't want to go to the JCC, and I certainly don't want to pick up towels around the pool at the JCC.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a huge problem. I will say that in terms of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, by the way, which is that's a whole other level, there is a much more of a predisposition for, in the fork of the road of money or mission, they take mission, but they do need a living wage. And that is something that we're looking at because, especially if you're going to live in a major metropolitan area, if you're saddled with student debt, if you do want to, in some way, provide for a family at some point, buy a home, etc., um, pay is a huge consideration. It does necessitate folks who are passion filled and purpose filled to take different routes. Again, I look to board members and the funding community to be able to uh, look at this and not necessarily say, this is overhead in ways that if you're signing up for the nonprofit sector, it's a vow of poverty.
And to follow up on Sue's question, Suzanne Alban had a question, which is that how do you then, even if you can first sell the person with the apple, it's a nice shiny apple, and say, here, come here, here's purpose in your life to be part of the Jewish community. But as you've just said, it's taken a long time to move people who are higher up on the ladder out. So if you're going to say to somebody, don't just come here, but there's an opportunity, how do you sell them on career growth and opportunity?
Well, this is where we look at it not as a career ladder, but as a career lattice. So let's look at the JCCs as a perfect system. It's 173 different nonprofits that are within a system. Maybe you're not going to be able to, climb a ladder in one of those JCCs. You're going to have to move around, or there's like a remote option. I think this is where we as a Jewish community have a competitive advantage because we do have 10,000 Jewish organizations, the vast majority of which, by the way, are tiny. So you're going to, by definition, if you want to move up, you're going to have to move out and then up. And that's where we have to think of ourselves as a field, be much more community minded in ways that are not what the previous generations necessarily invested in as much.
I thought you were going to tell me there were term limits and Barack has got 3 years to get it done, and then otherwise he's up and out.
That's a different
kidding,
TED
Barack.
Talk.
I'm kidding.
That's a different talk.
Somebody else, Phyllis, I think, raised the question of, all right, you don't want to be people's second choice, So again, how do you tell somebody who they think they're going this direction, but they didn't get that opportunity, so you don't want to just be the breadcrumbs that they're picking up. Whether it's a board member who's reaching out to somebody who knows somebody's young daughter or son is coming off a college campus or wants to make a lateral move and a career move, like, how do you say, hey, this is full of opportunity for you?
I think it's just showing them that opportunity. Everything from our research has said the folks who, if you're looking at different opportunities within, two different roles, you do look at salary and different, more quantitative markers in order to compare, to compare shop. But as soon as you're in, the most important thing that folks look for in their job is a good manager. And a good manager is going to ask you, Jon, where do you see yourself next year or in 3 years? Or do you want to do this fellowship? Or I put you up for a promotion, or there's a job opening, etc. Like, there is a way in which a good manager, just like a good educator, frankly, gets the most out of their people. And that's what people want. I mean, the way that we spend our lives is the way we spend our days is the way we spend our lives. Most people want to feel like they make progress in every day. And that's what we can show. And that's what we can, once you get into it, the folks who stick around, and I should say that 75% of the employees that we survey, and we've surveyed 55,000 unique ones, 75% of them have said, we will stay in the Jewish nonprofit sector, not their organization, in the sector. They're bought in ways that, and they still complain, don't worry, but we can do better. But yeah.
You mentioned how, the timing now is critical and how the landscape has changed. Francine Trachtenberg talks about how the image of Israel, what's happened since October 7th, the press paints a pretty negative image of Israel, Jews in general across the world. So how do you combat that when it comes to the media's reporting and when it comes to recruitment.
Yeah. What we've seen is that, consumers choose where they want to go, and that goes for employees too. This is where the surge has come in. There are some folks who are saying, either because of a certain push out of their current role, these are Jews working in non-Jewish settings, in academia, in nonprofits, in non-Jewish nonprofits, in government, and in business, who are saying, I actually don't feel safe here and I want to work within my community. There's that. There are also some who are saying, I have some unique things that I can contribute and I want to help the community again in some way. And we are seeing, look, a lot of younger folks who are anti-Zionist, do not believe in the kind of ways in which that I as an Israeli believe in terms of Israel's right to exist, et cetera, who are selecting out. They are. Like there's definitely that. And that is one of the realities that, again, that's why we need good leaders to figure out some of the ways to bob and weave through this.
Is there room at the JCC, do you think, and this may be problematic for all organizations, nonprofit organizations, but let's say we're moving off the college campus and we're moving into midlife, and somebody is saying, okay, I'm not finding the fulfillment I want. I don't have a seat at the table the way I'd like to, and I'd like to pivot or make a hard left turn and move into this sector. Do you think there's room for that? And I guess Brock could also jump in on this as to whether the doors are open for that. And that comes from Paul Gillis.
I mean, I will just say sector switchers are my favorite. Yes, please come on in. Like, we see a lot of that after somebody takes parental leave or caregiving leave. We saw a lot of that after COVID. People were at home saying, like, what am I doing with my life? I want more mission. I want more meaning. I want to contribute to the world in some good way. The thing that we need to do as a community is onboard them, is actually bring them in, because there is a Jewish nonprofit sort of, every industry has its own sort of like jargon and lingo and history and ways of doing things, frankly, that we need to change. But I think we need to make it easier and not just assume, where the keys are, what you need to do. And, Barak's got your back if you need to. Goodbye. Yeah. Barak, you want to jump in or?
No, Barak, I know you've got some things you'd like to add.
Yeah, no, first of all, I just want to, acknowledge Ed's question about marketing. I mean, it's been the age old about what's the values that I know as a parent and myself, you learn from having your kids work in summer camp, right? You're learning how to manage kids. You're learning how to work with co-counselors you might not get along with. All the skills you can learn from working in the JCC. We have to sell that sometimes in the summertime. Now we have to also be able to sell that your child working in a JCC from 23 to 28 could be working with lay leaders, working with committees, are really incredible skills that could be obviously, I think, very easily transferable to, the private sector. And I'll also just speak on a personal level that I think if we're going to, when we talk about good to great, going back to what I said earlier about, there's a thing called level 5 leadership. People that are like this relentless desire to want to make the world better. They want to make themselves better. That means like every 5 to 7 years they get an itch for what's the next training program, what's the next thing. And I would say, Ed, to your question about the young, if I didn't see at 22 in the JCC world that there wasn't a bogey for me to get into something at 28 and then 34, I would have been like, okay, how am I doing this? So we need to show, I see this with young MBAs, they want to move into a company already be in a management training program. And I chuckle because they don't even know how to manage yet themselves. But they think that I'm already in the, Morgan Stanley management program. We have to think in JCCs that if we're going to go after people that could one day be in the C-suite or be in senior, that they're already joining the JCC Association Young Leadership Development Program or whatever it's going to be called. But they have to feel that there's a path. It's not what some people used to think JCCs were for, my friends that were wandering who didn't know what they needed to do with their life. So you work at the JCC for 5-6 years and see if you get your act together. We shouldn't be seen as the job for wandering young people. I want to, Gali, I know as we pull this together, first of all, Jon, what a treat just to have you with us. I've been watching your real stories for a long time, and just, Gali, thank you for also going on this little pivoting from us of not just having you come and make a presentation, but being in conversation with Jon, which I found to be extremely stimulating and interesting, and one that we need to have for professionals too, and not just our board. Gali, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Because I'm going to throw you a softball, okay? Gali, with all the work of the strategic priorities of Leading Edge and the reorganization that you are considering at this moment, and from the time that you began as employee number one to a team of 30 plus people now,
32. Yeah.
32, pretty incredible, because I feel like I've been with you since Genesis here, since the beginning. What might a relationship like JCCA have with Leading Edge at this moment? What are some of your priorities that you might be like, this is Bashir timing for the way you're thinking, and where could we maybe go on a journey together over the next 3 years?
Yeah. I love the question, and very much feel that there's alignment between the talent priorities that you have set and that the JCCA wants to manifest, and those that Leading Edge that we're hoping to support the field in. I think there's several layers of ways that we could build on a partnership that is already pretty rich with the JCC Association. One is around measurement. We firmly believed that you manage what you measure. And so being able to have all the JCCs in some way be able to assess their talent capabilities on the professional side, the executive side, and the board side. So that is definitely one area that would be very interesting to explore. Then from there, the data tells us where interventions are needed. And I can tell you where I think that they're needed just based on what we know from the field. The first time professionals, like if this is your first job, that onboarding to the field, having some sort of program that could be hugely helpful, because that sets your trajectory as a professional off in a completely different way. Those who are actually onboarded have a 9-point improvement on their performance than those who are not properly onboarded. So that's that onboarding. Then managers. Managers are like the mitochondria of the cell, truly. And we don't give them any support, and they're squeezed in ways. And I mean, writ large, I'm not talking about the JCC Association, just in general, but especially first-time managers, they are needing the kind of support and practice. This, management is a practice. It's not like you learn it from a book. So that management strata, onboarding new executives, like new CEOs. Leading Edge was formed because the overwhelming majority of CEOs were going to be turning over. That churn has continued. And so being able to onboard and create a cohort for executives, being able to orient them to here's how you are going to be expected to lead, and giving them a coach and the kind of leadership development. So that's on the professional side. On the board side, again, based on assessments, we know that the board chair is super important. So some form of board chair support, onboarding, connection. I mean, board chairs, in many ways are an island. You all are an island, and that's not fair. It doesn't have to be in ways, especially within a network and a system. And then board member recruitment and potential readiness is another area that. So all of this, I mean, I've really just outlined what we hope to, in some way, support the field in doing and mobilize the field in general. And it would be unbelievable to explore opportunities to work with the JCC Association, the team, and the network.
Oh, yeah, I have a quick question while he's coming back. What
Okay.
about the possibility of doing a program with, like, putting together a module that could be used for young teen engagement professionals, could be used for camp professionals, could be used for BBYO teens even, just like pitching the idea of long-term, what does Jewish communal service mean? How is it different than what you thought of in the past? So that we can start giving people the idea of it as a professional career before they just can't find a job at, JP Morgan or something.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a lot of the reason why we have recruitment challenges is the vast majority of folks don't know that there's an entire ecosystem of Jewish organizations. You don't just have to be a rabbi in order to, contribute to the community. So that's exactly. And part of the talent pipeline.
Gali, thank you. I know from even my going through the search process to get to this point, you've always been a trusted confidant and a longstanding friend of mine and colleague. So I just think our organizations are aligned, and thank you for your partnership and leadership. You know that you and I have already talked. Where should JCC Association lead? and where should we partner. And in both places, I think we can be leading and supporting. And we don't need to reinvent research. We don't need to reinvest onboarding. We just need to make sure that it's very applicable to the skill sets of running JCCs. And we know that in the not-for-profit eco world, executive leadership takes on lots of training. There's something, just as you and I have talked about, unique about running a business the size of a JCC that's sometimes different than other in the not-for-profit sector. So glad to have you on the journey. Jon, so cool, so grateful that you said yes to us. So if we could give, I don't know, like a thank you to Jon and Gali for joining us today. But it's really just meant to be a crescendo that when we talk about our 3 centers of excellence, that talent, it's all about the who, then the what. I'll say it forever, is that we got to get the right people doing the right work. The magic will happen. And obviously we need to do that with lay people, funders, strategic organizational partners like Gali. So to Jon and Gali, thank you. You're welcome to join us for a conversation around Israel, but we also know that you have lots of other things you might want to do for the rest of your day, but it really means a lot that you took the time to join us today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Gali,
Thank you so much.
so much.
Yeah, Jon, thank you. Thanks, everyone.